Welcome to the Sacred Thread podcast, where we explore spirituality, psychology, and the deeper questions of what it means to be human. I'm your host, Winston Janis. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sacred Thread podcast. I have a special guest today, Thomas Davis IV, who's a contemplative artist based in Los Angeles who explores the connections between the principles of the Dharma, Christian mysticism, jazz, ethics, poetry, art, storytelling, and science for a multidisciplinary exploration of who we are and what is possible for us. Thomas self-identifies as a contemplative artist. He's a founder of Avant-Dharma, which is one of the present expressions of his cumulative years of practice and service. He is also a mentor in the mindfulness meditation teacher certification program, which is how we connected. Thomas was my mentor for the 2 years that I was part of that program that I graduated, myself along with a small cohort of us that we were all working together. Graduated earlier this year. So that was a wonderful experience. Thanks so much for joining me today, Thomas.
Thank you, Winston. I'm happy to be here and to extend this sacred thread, as we call it.
Yeah, fun new experiment, right? So
Yeah, definitely.
no, I've always been kind of grateful that we connected through the MMTCP program that's facilitated by Jack Kornfield, Tara Brock, and I've always appreciated your kind of facilitation, your guidance through those 2 years, your perspectives and your practices. There's no really set agenda for our meeting today. I just thought it would be interesting to talk and, as we said, see where the spirit leads our conversation. So we could start by perhaps I could ask, one question I had was, let's see here. If you could maybe share a little bit about your own journey, your own background for our listeners, like spiritual journey in particular, right? What first drew you? I know you were involved in ministry at one time at like a Baptist church, and then obviously got involved with Buddhist practice, East Bay
Yeah.
Meditation Center. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say about that.
Yeah, well, I wasn't always inclined towards spiritual things. My spiritual awakening didn't happen until I was like 20 or 21 years old. I'd just gotten out of a short stint in the military during peacetime. This was in the late 80s. Um, and I was, just kind of like the effects of youth and, searching for meaning and purpose and excitement and fun and all those things kind of culminated into like, some elements of destructive behavior patterns, with alcohol and, you know, clubs and, all those
Mm.
kinds of things. And what was so interesting, Winston, about that, before I even set foot in a church, I would say, I went to a club one night with some friends of mine, and it was a vibrant club, mixed crowd, very diverse and everything. But I had this moment. I'm looking at a bar, I'm looking at the dance floor, I'm looking at the DJ, and I'm noticing the dimensions of the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this is basically just a building, and they built a bar and they put a stand for some music and some speakers, and people come here, and it's really loud, and it's kind of like fun, but I'm just looking at it objectively, right? And I'm like, there's really a lot of lonely people in here.
Yeah.
And everybody seems just to be trying to avoid that.
Mm.
And this was just an observation that I had, right?
Right.
I didn't even know how to make a spiritual, translation or definition for it. I just had this moment and I was like, wow, this is, and I'm here too. You know what I mean? And I didn't think I was having those experiences when I came in here. I didn't have that as a meaning for why I come here, but I began to have some insight as to why I was needing that level of, engagement or distraction or escapism or whatever it is, right? So, couple of, I'd say maybe a year or two later, I ended up going to a church with my sister. My sister was more kind of a devout Christian at the time. And she's like, you should come to church. And I'm like, yeah, okay, okay. And, push it off for like a year, 2 years. And then I found myself going to this church, and it was a Hispanic church
Mm-hmm.
in a place called Union City, California, which is Northern California, a suburb of like Oakland, Berkeley. And it was really dynamic because, this church, they spoke in tongues. I didn't know what that was.
Mm-hmm.
There was words of prophecy coming in, where somebody would say something in the back and somebody would respond up front. It was kind of bizarre, but I could also sense this kind of feeling that there was something supernatural, I guess I would say, that was happening in a way. You know what I
Mm.
mean? But I didn't have any reference for it. I was just, okay, this is their thing. I respect it. I didn't try to jump in or anything,
So
but
you didn't grow up with that background?
no, no, no,
Mm.
not at all.
Okay.
It was like I got thrown into an ocean or something like that.
Mm.
But anyway, at some point I came to accept, Jesus as Lord and Savior, and it was a very real connection that I felt, and I began to learn how to pray and read the Bible and so on and so forth. Typical conventional Christian orientation. And I
Yeah.
stayed at that church in that particular community for about 8 years. And it was when I began to see my social eyes begin to open, my political eyes begin to open, and I began to see, like, you know what, there are some things here that I can't really align with. It was a strict church, though. I mean, the
Mm.
women wore dresses and doilies on their head. I mean,
Mm.
it was what we would call today like a right-wing conservative environment. And I
Gotcha.
didn't know. I just knew the people were fine, and so on and so forth. But when it came to social issues and stuff, I saw them kind of shrink back from the line a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm one of like three black people in this church,
Mm.
maybe on occasion, maybe 10. But I was like, that wasn't the reason that I felt the need to leave. I just was seeing the way that that progression in that community. I didn't feel like I had a call to ministry at the time either,
Mm.
but I was just seeing that, there was just a lot of things that I wasn't really willing to comply with in my personal life. And so I ended up leaving, and I went into like a period of about a year and a half or so of just exile, no church community, anything like that. And then I found another church through a friend of mine in Oakland, California, and it was in the hood, West Oakland. And this church seemed to be, I kind of matured to the place where the messages that were coming from this church was more like, God understands your struggle. God understands your weakness. But at the previous church, it was more like, God's not happy with you.
Ah.
You need to get your act together. He's coming back, you know what I mean, and so
Mm.
forth. And so I joined this second church, and it was a perfect fit. And that was where I began to get more involved in like the classes, and I was got kind of getting noticed for the kind of questions I was asking, and I got invited to become part of a ministry training kind of cohort, if you will. And it was there that a couple of years later, that I just kind of fell in love with the people, and I ended up going into ministry there as a lay minister, preaching and teaching and all those types of things. And I was there for about, I would say, about 7 years, and I wanted to go to theological seminary, but I didn't know how to do it, and I didn't seem I was getting the support to do it there just because of people's time and other things. Church was growing. And so I just began to like really feel a sense of curiosity and hunger to really take my studies further, but it didn't seem like that community was the place to do it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I wanted to understand more about the kingdom of God within, and I wanted to understand the nature of spirit, and all these other kinds of things. And that just wasn't being explored there. So I ended up leaving there, and I
Mm-hmm.
went into exile again for about 2 years.
Mm.
And during that 2 year period, I kind of went through a lot of prayer and meditation and deconstructing the things from Christianity that I didn't need anymore. And it led me to a place of accepting my own divinity. Whatever God was, I understood that he wasn't outside of me, or they weren't outside of me, whatever that entity is,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's all here.
Mm.
And so I took the responsibility to accept my own divinity in that God lives here. And I said, well, now that I've done that, I guess I need to find out how to look within. So I said, maybe I'll try yoga, maybe I'll try meditation. I went to a Bikram yoga
Well, I'm
place
kind of
and
curious, like maybe if you could elaborate just a little bit before moving on, like this idea of finding your own divinity or the divinity within you or whatever it was that we call God residing within. Like, how did you come to that sort of realization, and what does that mean to you, I guess, you know?
you know, I think I'm still involved in that process
Mm.
because what I remember was standing in the mirror in my bathroom. And that's where I conducted that ceremony. And it was just kind of spontaneous. I didn't have any community to get advice from, you know what I mean? Or any instructions. So
Yeah.
I just faced myself. And with the knowledge and experience that I had in interacting with spirit up to that time, and all of the things that I attribute to spirit in terms of the things that the providence and the provisions that had been given to me, I had enough experience to where I could say, God, I trust you, and obviously you trust me too. So I'm kind of ignoring a lot of the other people's stories about you now,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm willing to fully accept the responsibility of what it means for me to be in relationship to spirit, or whatever that is. And it was a mystery that I embraced at that time,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a palpable affirmation.
It was a shift, it sounds like.
It was that too, yeah. And it was a shift because I had been shifted. I had been shifting, or being shifted for over the previous decade in my pursuit and quest to be in alignment with the divine. I thought, my world was going to end when I left that first church. I didn't know what to do. And then when I left the second one, which was like home, I didn't know what to do. But it was like this progression of maturation where I was slowly just walking away from like the umbilical cords and learning to walk on my own as a spiritual person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what led me to go to the East Bay Meditation Center. Having no prior meditation experience or interaction with any Buddhist philosophy at all, I went there because I wanted to acquire the tools to be able to look within.
Mm-hmm. You knew some part of you knew that even though you didn't know much about meditation or Buddhism, you knew that that's what they were working on. That's what they were doing there.
I that's what I think. I was reading this part of my deconstruction process was to read this book called Destructive Emotions by Daniel Goleman. And Destructive Emotions was a transcript of the Dalai Lama's Mind and Life conference, which he held annually at some point. And it was like a full transcript of hearing these debates and these talks that were happening in Dharamsala. And that was kind of like me being a fly on the wall, looking at some of the most enlightened people, have these conversations about what they're doing. And so I was like, I can do this. I want to do this, you
Hmm.
know. And so I had a little bit of support virtually through that book,
Gotcha.
but it was solid enough for me to be able to take the next step.
Okay. So then you started on your path of meditation and mindfulness and eventually started mentoring and teaching.
Yes, yes. Yes, I went into East Bay Meditation Center, went through a commit to Dharma training program, which was just an orientation to what the Dharma is. Following that, I was nominated to go into the Community Dharma Leader Training Program at Spirit Rock. That led to me being awarded an opportunity to live and work at Spirit Rock. So I lived and worked there from 2015 through 2018.
Yeah.
I was like, how did this happen? How is it that I'm actually living in a meditation center now? You know?
Yeah, and then for those who don't know, right, that's the kind of Insight Meditation Center, right, that is founded by Jack Cornfield in California.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And there's thousands of people that go through there every year. And so I was fortunate to have the opportunity to be there and to also kind of be behind the curtain of what makes everything work. Following that 3 year period, well, while I was there, I can I completed the commit to Dharma, community Dharma leader training. I went through a Buddhist chaplaincy training, which was a year-long training with Gil Fronsdal at the Sadi Center for Buddhist Studies. I did that while I was at Spirit Rock. And following that, I co-founded a Dharma center called Insight Richmond. It was basically a community meditation gathering. They meet every week and sometimes on weekends, but I helped found that. And then in 2018, I came to Los Angeles to see how they do Dharma down here. And I came in to an organization called InsightLA Meditation Center. And I've been here ever since. And then I started mentoring with the recommendation from Trudy Goodman, Jack Cornfield's wife. So
Awesome.
that's how we
Yeah.
met.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and so, and then I know you've been involved in a lot of other kind of projects, and even in addition to that, like Avant-Dharma, which I mentioned in the introduction, that you started, and jazz, and you brought up music and jazz and the arts a lot when you were kind of mentoring us during those groups, things to provoke thought. And yeah, I mean, that's maybe something I could ask you about too. I mean, we can go in any direction here we want, right? But like, how does jazz, music, philosophy, the arts, how does that inform your practice or the contemplative path? You know?
Well, I appreciate you asking that. When I was at Spirit Rock, I had a little inside circle of, handful of employees, and we're at a meditation center, but when we're in our private time, we're talking about hip hop and jazz, and we were all music lovers.
Hmm.
Um, and we like loud music, but it was just kind of ironic that we have these other interests that would never happen at a meditation center.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I just I had a very good community at Spirit Rock in that way, just a handful of people that we could just like really get into some of the philosophical aspects of like these artistic explorations as well as literature that we were into. And that began to just create this kind of synergistic merging, a weaving of a tapestry of sorts that combined my dedicated meditation practice and Dharma training with this other aspect, which I was not giving up, which was jazz and the arts and stuff like that. And so as I continued to be committed to both, they just kind of melded into one. I
Mm.
would say, like today, um, one of the things that has really inspired me is this quote by Anais Nin, who said that it is the function of art to renew our perception. The things
Mm.
that we are familiar with, we cease to see. And then it goes on into some other things, but I really was have become really locked in on that, the fact that she said it is the function of art to renew our perception. And you, as a mindfulness meditation facilitator, Winston, you may understand that one of the aspects of mindfulness meditation
Just to
is
renew
to
your
have you
perception.
renew your perception.
Right.
So I'm intrigued, deeply intrigued by the possibility that this thing that we've been doing and this desire and the outcome that we're looking for in terms of our meditation and awareness practice is a function of art itself, not an object, not a statue or a picture on the wall, but some sort of living kind of principle that
Yeah.
we're engaged with.
Yeah.
And
That's very cool and powerful, and it's interesting to draw that connection between art and meditation. Yeah.
so, this is, the website Avant-Dharma basically was conceived at Spirit Rock, where I was looking at the avant-garde jazz tradition, which is really kind of unconstructed, free flowing, yet cohesive in terms of, grabbing one's attention, and the Dharma itself. And I wanted to just find a way to bring those two things, those two passions together, because one of the things about the genre of jazz is that studying the character, not just like being, enthralled by the music and the tones, but it's what are these people trying to say? And how are they allowing themselves to be trained and shaped and molded with the intent of being able to arrive in the present moment and to deliver whatever they can allow to come through them? No script, no notes, whatever.
Right.
And if there is script and notes, they're not afraid to go outside of the boundaries of that. So, the jazz artists for me not only represented people who are acclimated to seizing the present moment, but there's also an element of emotional maturity that I think that they demonstrate, because when they play ballads or things that evoke uh, specific types of emotions, which may be melancholious for many people, it's like, oh, I don't want to feel that way right now. I was able to see, like, these people are doing this on purpose. They have composed something that can take you to different places in your childhood or at some other place in your life where it wasn't going so well, or it brings up memories of missing someone or something not working out. But they're doing it on purpose, Winston.
Like, emotions that you would typically associate as negative.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But they have the emotional maturity to construct a whole composition, and they face their emotion, that emotion themselves. It's something that they've lived through, and now they're telling the story on the other side.
Right. Right.
So I want to be able to do that as a teacher. I want to be able to create an atmosphere and to purposely um, create a space for people to encounter themselves in these different ways. Not always negative. I don't even consider negative emotions as negative. It's just an emotion. But to be able to live with these aspects of ourselves that we typically aren't so inclined to do. I know I've been kind
Yeah.
of going on for a
Oh,
minute,
no,
so
you're
I'm
fine.
open for.
No, I appreciate it. It's fascinating. And I think it's, there's some good insights here. And it's funny because it makes me think about, I interviewed Jimmy from
Hmm.
our cohort on this podcast. He was like my
Yes.
first guest, and he, I ended up titling that episode "Making Mindfulness Our Own" or "Your Own," and that was kind of part of what we covered was having the freedom, giving yourself the permission to kind of make the practice your own, that it doesn't have to look a specific way. And I think that's something that did come through your mentorship, that okay, it doesn't, not to be exactly like Jack Cornfield or Tara Brach, or like these cookie cutter, not that they're cookie cutter, right? But to be yourself, to find that authenticity within you and bring that out. And that's part of your offering. And that takes mindfulness. And that's kind of, I think, what you're saying here, what they were doing with jazz, that jazz itself is like a mindfulness practice, that it comes in many forms, including that there's this thread that connects them.
Yes, and an anecdotal piece is something that came from Miles Davis, and he would articulate what you said like this. He would say it takes a long time to play like yourself.
Hmm.
So mindfulness, yes, is a crucial element, but time is also an essential, element of coming to that realization, and you're not going to experience that fruition if the mindfulness, if the commitment to the practice and time aren't coinciding. You know what I mean? it,
Yeah.
it takes time, but it's like, you know what, I'm committed to being myself,
Right.
and every time you do it, it's like brand new,
Hmm.
because you're changing all the time, and so there's a new version of yourself ready to emerge at all times, but we have a choice in that moment to revert back to something that worked the last time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Kind of like, almost like how in our current culture and society, and as you think about doing your own thing and putting it out there in the world, we almost have to, people are thinking in terms of like making algorithms happy, right? And how do you sell yourself the most effective way? I think about how Jack Cornfield, in some of his talks, he said that when he's on planes and somebody's sitting next to him, he might just say, "Oh, I'm in sales," right? But he said he's only half kidding about that, right? That
Yeah.
it's like, oh, he's a spiritual teacher, a meditation teacher, but he's actually also in sales, which is, there's some truth that we live in a capitalistic society, and we are incentivized to try to sell ourselves. And
Yeah.
like you said, to find a formula that works. And
Yeah.
now we have AI that enhances that process tenfold, right? And even before this, we were kind of talking about, okay, introducing you, and you're kind of saying, well, your identity is always changing, and who you are, and these interests. Thinking about, weaving together jazz and meditation and Christianity. And it's like, I'm kind of thinking too, as I put myself out there now with this podcast, with writing, etc. It's like, okay, who am I? Well, I'm a therapist. I'm a certified mindfulness meditation teacher now. I'm an ordained pastor, right, in the United Church of Christ. And the world, though, people want simple kind of like, okay, well, who are you? What are you talking about? Right? And it's not always easy to put yourself in that box. I mean, the more and more I get frustrated with the boxes and the labels that we have to deal with, you know.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed when it comes to. I have a background in sales too. I've worked, like in industry of like healthcare and biopharmaceuticals and technology. I have a background in sales.
You've been all over the
Uh,
map.
yeah, I've done that, but I haven't really, because this orientation for me of being a leader, a spiritual leader, I guess you would say, I haven't really allowed myself to allow the two, like the commercial side of it to intermingle so much with my spiritual intention,
Mm,
which may not be the wisest thing. I don't know. I'm still working that out, but it's like the commitment, when I came into the Dharma or Buddhist philosophy, if you will, I came from the church having like accepted the responsibility of cherishing my divine nature, right?
yeah.
And that led to me accepting the call to be a teacher. Again, that was like a personal kind of commitment, which seemed to have affirmations that are almost impossible to explain outside of community validation as well. But I came into the Dharma with the same commitment to continue to reach people and to be of service to people. So my orientation to spirituality is rooted in service.
Mm,
And the models that I've seen, from the Christian context to the Buddhist context and the other examples, uh, it 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 doesn't really merge or coincide with, I guess, with capitalism, if you will,
yeah.
or chasing money, if you will. You know
Right.
what I mean? It's so I've abandoned myself to some great extent, Jimmy, to trusting that the things that I need, like Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God and all things will be added unto you. I can't help it, but I'm still very, very much influenced by that.
Yeah. So you would,
And it's not popular, you know what I mean? It's not the popular thing or persuasion to have, but that's what got me this far, you know what I mean?
so it's kind of like that in some way, maybe that Christian identity is still something that you claim, that it, all of this has flown out of that.
It was the genesis for everything else that has transpired afterward. I mean, if it
Yeah.
wasn't for that, me and you would have never met.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like the beginning of the bridge.
Right. Well, that's what I'm also, I'm trying to be involved in that work, that it still feels somehow part of my own roots, right?
Yeah,
Christianity and the Christian tradition, and it's got baggage associated with it in our culture, and a lot of negative associations or misleading associations that I wouldn't claim for myself. And yet I can't let go. I like translating the tradition. I like trying to say, okay, look, there's still things of value. I like exploring the intersection between Buddhism and Christianity,
yeah,
and exploring all that is something I've been passionate about. I think there is a lot of overlap actually.
yeah. They're not really so much different. And I would say the one common denominator, Christianity gets the bulk of this denominator, and the common denominator is man and their influence to twist or pervert, the nature of the Christian tradition. You know what I mean? It's just the way that it's been influenced by politics and power and all these other kinds of things. But I feel like I was able to have the maybe the rare experience of seeing and tasting like the best aspects of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to be able to stand back and see like, oh wow, there's just all these claws and nets and snares and bombs like wrapped around this tradition that it's anathema for for the average person to have any sort of attraction to it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I get that too, because I'm seeing that too, but I also tasted something of what it was initially trying to offer people. And so that's what I have maintained contact with. And that is also what I've seen in other traditions, the best aspects of it. Buddhism, it has a lot of rules and all kinds of things if you want to explore all of that and really kind of practice conformity or whatever.
Right.
But I'm just trying to keep everything very fluid and very productive and alive for myself because I see that I am a vital component to the what the expression of Buddhism or Christianity is in the world right now. If
Right.
I don't, if those traditions without me and the people that I reach, people probably won't really experience what those can really offer um, without my more liberated expression of it. But I would say this, I'm saying the same thing about you. Like, people are going to be attracted to how you integrate
Mm-hmm.
and how Buddhism or Christianity allows you to flourish as a human being because they're attracted to you. So it's like, what are you doing, Winston, that 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 makes God appealing? Or what are you doing that makes the Dharma appealing or the Buddha appealing? You are like the interface to the tradition.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, and there's a lot of beauty in these traditions. And I think, like you said, it's being lucky enough to be being exposed to the best of each tradition, almost like the best of each person, right? Because a religion is really an expression of humanity, right? I mean,
Yeah,
there is no religion apart from human beings, really. Um, and like you said earlier, making sure that it's rooted in service. I mean, that kind of sticks with me, that even though we're kind of compelled to try to sell ourselves in a capitalistic society so we could put food on the table, right? Um, and service is not totally separate from that, I suppose. But this idea of it being rooted in service, it's like, okay, what continues to draw me towards Christianity, Buddhism? Yes, in part, it's definitely the beauty of it, the fact that we're talking about something that's universal, but also it strikes me that these things are needed in our particular context today.
yeah,
Whether it's mindfulness, I mean, the smartphones, the distraction, the burnout, the everything that's driving us kind of into the ground and dividing us, we need that mindfulness for so many different reasons. And you could say Christianity in the same way. Part of what inspires me about what Jesus taught, or a core thing, is this seeing past the labels of people, uh, caring for the outsider, the marginalized, the outcasts, sitting down at the dinner table, right, and having compassion for whoever it is, any human being. This idea there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, right? We're all one in Christ, kind of thing. That's a message I don't think is actually outdated. We probably need to hear. We're not hearing it now, you know.
Mary Mag. There's a story where Mary Magdalene, you know, came with a box of ointment, an alabaster box,
Yeah.
and Jesus was at a gathering, and with all kinds of important people around him, and she made her way through and broke the box. And people were like, "Do you know how expensive that is?" And she poured it on him and began to, anoint him with it. And to the people, to the conventional mindset, it was like, this is such a waste. And you're really just, disturbing our meeting. And so on. And who called you here anyway? And and it was that type of relationship that Christ had made, or that type of impact Christ had made in his community,
Yeah.
where someone was willing to go through the embarrassment and the humility of really needing to push through the gatekeepers, if you will, for her to show her appreciation for the impact he had. But he did it in a way that the religious institutions weren't. There was temples, right, that you could have went to, but he was offering a flavor of God, or a variation of God, or the divine, if you will, in a way that really made an impact.
Right.
You know what I mean? And this is what I'm bringing, circling back to about our own orientation to our service to people. He wasn't trying to be an imitation Pharisee or Sadducee or anything. He was just being who he was.
Yeah.
And that's the way that I feel that we can really touch the nerve of people. And even in his defense of the outcast, the lady who they were picking up stones to throw at her, he was sitting there writing his finger in the dirt. And he's like, "Hey, whoever is without sin among you, cast the first stone." He was there in her defense. She meant nothing to the other people around her, but he was willing to put his life in front of hers to justify her existence,
Yeah.
even in the very unconventional, untoward, kind of circumstance of being accused of something. So I feel like humility, Winston, is something that is not talked about a lot in the Buddhist tradition. I think it's modeled in the Buddhist tradition, but it's like opening up discussions around the actual virtues that we need to be cultivating outside of love and compassion and joy and equanimity. But
Mm,
these other areas of humility and meekness and some of these other things that Christian tradition talks about.
absolutely.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Especially today where it feels like everybody's got an opinion and they got a strong one. you know?
Yeah, or everybody's super exciting and fabulous.
Yeah. Yeah. We struggle, I think,
Everybody's
with humility.
amazing.
We do. I think we struggle with humility. Absolutely, as a culture, you know. Yeah. And that's, yeah, that just seems top of mind. I know the news, the things going on in the world affect us all. And maybe that kind of leads into, okay, if we're going to be of service, I mean, maybe we've been dancing around this point, but it's like, okay, how do these mindfulness and contemplative practices, um, how do they intersect with issues about race, justice, healing in our communities? What does the work look like for you, for me, for us going forward?
Hmm.
Collective liberation, I think, is one way you put it in the past.
It's interesting, because I've watched the news a lot. I watch it probably more than I need to.
hmm hmm
But I don't know what else to do right now. So, I mean, outside of pursuing my own kind of vibe and everything like that. But I feel like there's a sacred thread, I guess, if we could say this, that's being extended, slowly being woven out. um, in our society where there's this thing around empathy. And this thing around empathy is something that I feel is being raised to address the nature of the division, the divisiveness in our particular society, and to have the humility to be willing to hear the other person's point of view, to be willing to agree to disagree and still see the value in that person's existence with their particular persuasion and them in kind to have that reciprocated. But it's like this willingness to understand that at the end of the day, this is a human being who puts his their pants or their dress on or whatever, one leg at a time, whatever, and they deserve to live.
Yeah.
There is no difference that is so great that they don't deserve to live, you know, and to pursue happiness like the rest of us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I'm curious then what you might say, because I largely I agree with you, and I try to stay rooted in that. I feel a conviction around that we need to refuse to dehumanize each other, and like you said, see the humanity in each other. That okay, you know, our neighbors. I mean, no matter their, I have neighbors, friends, family members who are on the other side of the political spectrum and all that, and they're not necessarily bad people, right? They're good people. They love their families. They love their children. They're also tired of the division. All this stuff. Um, but like, I guess what question, you know, I recently read a thing about Charlie Kirk and his views and all that, and and it was this idea that was, I think, going around on social media and people writing about it, that we may need to expand our definition of violence, right? That a lot of times when we think about violence in society, we're talking about physical harm, right? That
Yeah.
is in a very direct, observable manner. But they were saying that certain people who are espousing certain rhetoric and ideologies, uh, like it may have the result, right, of doing things like stripping people of health care,
Hmm.
right, or taking
Which
away
is a
their,
form of
that
violence.
exactly, or they're taking
Yeah.
away their income, or these kind of systemic results that are maybe not very, they're not as violent as we saw on TV with some, you know, or on YouTube, but they do result in violence, right?
And violence, it's interesting because I think at some point in our orientation with each other at MMTCP, I may have alluded to this idea of acquiescing the present moment while assessing a sense of threat that is happening on the horizon, something that is threatening your sense of security, stability, equanimity, whatever, right? And that thing that's on the horizon represents something that's going to deprive you or take something from you. And that is violent because it gets you upset and it hasn't even happened yet, but you see it coming over the hill,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think your point on with this thing about expanding our definition of violence, because these are things that we work with in our mindful awareness practice all the time.
Yeah.
We see something that could happen, and we could allow and the mind wants to attach to that and to allow you to live that out like in the present moment when it hasn't even happened yet. So our mindfulness practice brings us back to the present moment where it hasn't happened yet, but we feel like it will. You
Right.
know what I mean? But these are, but in your particular example, these are things that are actually happening, but they're happening on paper. They're happening in a computer. They're happening through legislation,
Right.
and they haven't exactly hit the mainstream society yet, but there's this pending, I guess, anticipation of what it will be like,
I
you
guess
know?
I guess the point the reason I bring this up, right? Because earlier we were saying we need to see the humanity in each other. We got to
Yeah,
be able to be able to approach one another with a spirit of respect, that even if we disagree, can we sit down as two fellow human beings and respect one another, and honor one another in that way? What does it mean, though, if we expand that definition of violence? Like, how does that interfere or not with that? Because I could see some people saying that, okay, I'm not going to respect you if you're doing violence to me through your rhetoric. Does that make sense?
exactly. Or if you're doing violence to me through the laws you're passing
Right.
or whatever. You know what I mean? So I think what you have there is this situation where both people or both parties, if you will, or whoever those entities are, aren't seeing the same thing.
For
They're
sure.
not looking at the overall impact on the whole because because it's just these two or three or whatever entities that have the access to implement these changes. And so I think this is like really the rub of where we are.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, I'm not going to hurt you physically, you're not going to hurt me physically, but are you going to do things that are going to threaten the security of my family in the future? Like, yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to hurt you physically.
Yeah. The argument, right. The argument, yeah, that I've heard people say is that it's one thing to disagree on, what's your favorite food or what's your favorite show on Netflix, right? But it's another thing when you disagree about like these like issues of morality at their core, kind of
Yeah.
thing, right? That
Yeah.
people are going to say, okay, not all opinions are created equally, essentially,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what do we do then? That's really the problem of where we are.
And this is where I've heard some threads in conversation uh about the need for more moral fortitude in our society. People who are able and willing to look at the benefit of the whole as much as possible. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And um, as opposed to these like factions that are really pushing really hard on certain things, for the benefit of a few. So I think that these things can happen, like with you being a pastor and a mindfulness facilitator. These things can happen at a meditation sit for you. You're. I think one of the things I've tried to impart is just this idea of really looking at the whole group and trying to see what's of benefit for the whole group, even though the whole group might not be able to tell you everything that they need. They're just showing up for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
But us as a leader, we're there and endeavoring to create a space that's beneficial for everybody. As much, at least that's what our intention is. That's where our effort is. Whether it succeeds every single time is another thing, but it's something that we're practicing with.
Yeah. I mean, we show up, we do our work, we focus on the message that we feel convicted to preach, to teach about, to speak about, compassion. And yeah, I mean, I wonder too if part of what we need is actually a Christian author. I don't know if you're familiar, Richard Rohr.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's written a lot of books, and I remember specifically it's from The Naked Now, I think, where he's talking about the present moment, really. I think it's that book where he references, he said a friend traveled to Tibet or somewhere, some Buddhist country, uh, and brought back pictures describing a kind of initiation process that Buddhist monks will go through, where they that the for it goes on for I think days, where a teacher will ask the student, okay, what are all the teachings of Buddhism? What are all of their positive implications? And then what are all of their negative, harmful outcomes and implications that could come from this, from misinterpreting it, from twisting these teachings?
Hmm.
And they have to exhaust both the positive and the negative. And to me, that strikes me as like, that's something we don't seem to know how to do.
That's another level of perfecting a craft, which I think is very I'm gonna write the name of that book down, by the way. The Naked Now.
Yeah, Richard Rohr.
Roar. That's another level of craft that I think is a very um very beneficial to explore if you're really invested in 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 I would say in being as fluid and as clear in your intention as possible, is to put
Mm-hmm.
your own ideas through a sift, to sift through your
Yes.
own ideas.
A
Um,
humility, going back to what we said about
yeah, it's
humility.
humility. Like, it's like when you mentioned the idea about, I'll show up to preach to the congregation based on what my conviction is. I'm paraphrasing what you said, but the word conviction is one that I'm very familiar with, and I think it's very essential. But there's just something about showing up in front of a group of people in that moment, in that naked now, with a sense of conviction. And it made me ask the question, what is it that influences our convictions?
Mm.
And if we're showing up in the naked now, in that moment, ready to dispense an idea, is there anything else that can influence us to do something different? That's kind of like how I'm trying to approach anytime I get before a group of people. It's like I have this idea I've been working on for 3 days, and I'm like really thrilled by it,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm willing to sacrifice it and to be influenced by something else in that moment when I'm actually in there. And if nothing comes up, I keep the door open, but if nothing else comes up, I'll just go with this thing and it may work. I'm willing to take the risk with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, have a degree of openness, receptivity, allowing
But
ourselves to be
I
led.
want my conviction is kind of rooted in this idea that, I've got it. I'm right.
Mm.
And I want to be influenced to abandon that. If I can find a way to be open enough, and just wanting to be aligned. Because one of the things, Winston, that I think about is when I'm before a group of people, my intention is to reach every heart in that group, if it's two people or 25 or 500, whatever. But I'm like, my humility says, I don't know how to do that. How do I how do I meet the need of every heart that's here? I don't know,
Yeah.
but something does know.
The spirit, God,
Yeah,
whatever.
something does know. And I'm trying to be influenced by that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what
Right.
I'm saying?
Yeah, I think right. There's too many of us that have really lost connection with that sense of trust, the a willingness to, I mean, right? Like anxiety, ego. It's wanting to be in control, right? And the hardest thing in the world, but this is to let go of the ego, like Eckhart Tolle talks about, and many of the Buddhists, and ultimate Christ, right? To it is no longer I, but Christ,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, to find what is it that's beyond us. Can we be led by that and trust in that? That we show up, right? But then we surrender the fruit of our action, you know? And
It's just I just I call it, like divine intelligence, I guess you'd say, you know what I mean? I don't know what God is. I don't,
yeah.
I don't know. But I believe that, when I look at a goldfish or a cat or a dog or a lizard climbing up a tree or a bird or other human beings, you know, it's like on a physiological aspect because they have eyes. It's like the eyes tell me a lot. And even in nature, if I notice a lizard looking at me, I feel like there's something more looking at me than just that lizard.
Mm.
If a bird is watching me, I'm like, I'm being watched. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it to create paranoia, but I just feel like in the sense of like the interconnected nature of our universe, things, we see and we're being seen.
yeah. Mm.
You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that to suggest to anybody, that there's any sort of meaning that I'm putting on that, but it's just at the very basic level. I'm just like coming into an awareness that these living beings, although their lifespan is much shorter than mine, and they're on a different level of life than me, so to speak, um, they are part of the web of a divine intelligence.
Mm.
I don't even know their language, but I can at least acknowledge that, I see that you are an aspect of this web of divine intelligence that I'm endeavoring to be in alignment with. So,
That's beautiful.
gratitude.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, yeah, I don't know how to finish that, but yeah.
Well, I thought it's beautifully articulated. Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that idea. The idea that we're all interconnected and that, as Alan Watts put it, my favorite quote, you are an aperture through which the whole universe is looking at and exploring itself.
Right.
That's,
Alan Watts. I wish I could have got some time with him.
oh God, you're telling me. I wish so too. He's my favorite.
I don't know how he got so expanded, but I don't think anybody could teach him what he came to know. He just found his way there, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe he was influenced that way too, but
Yeah, but that's the idea that it makes me think of, seeing and being seen. I mean, that's what's happening. That's the game we're involved in, right? But well, Thomas, I mean, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. I know
it seems
we're
like we just got started, right?
I know. Well, maybe we'll have to do a part 2 or I'll expand these more, but no, I think it's been a great conversation. I always really enjoy your unique perspectives and take on things. So I really appreciate you being on the brand new Sacred Thread podcast. Thanks for
Sacred
being part of
thread.
this. Yeah.
Thank you, Winston. Thank you. I'm honored that you invited me to come here and to share ideas with you. And yeah, yeah, I'm still the same. I'm trying to figure some of this stuff out.
Yeah. And before we say goodbye, I mean, is there anything you'd like to share with listeners in terms of uh, You want to plug anything, any projects you're working on, or things you want people to check out or be aware of?
I want people to be aware of your own emotional state and allow yourself, even when you crash out and burn, there's a new version of you that's going to arise from that. So this is kind of like letting go of the ego, like this identity that this moment, I feel like I'm losing everything because a lot of people are losing themselves,
Mm,
losing this sense of who they are supposed to be. And there's another version of you that is willing to arise if we can let go in those moments of trying to hold everything together. And I just want to, only thing I want to plug is for people to trust that it's not over. Allow your life to continue to go through the things that you think you can't handle.
yeah, that's beautiful, Thomas. Thank you.
And Winston, you've lived that I've witnessed that in you. And I won't go into details, but I've seen you evolve.
Yeah, it was an interesting timing in terms of the couple of years that we spent together.
Yeah.
We went to a
And I want to
divorce,
thank you
and
for that.
my father passed away. Oh man! But it's all, you're right. You get through it, and it's not the end of the story, right?
No.
So
There's a story being written. I think there's a proverb that says that every person's life is lived as a story that's being told. So everybody has a story that they're involved in.
yeah,
I just want the people to respect your story.
mm, indeed. All right, Thomas. Well, thank you so much, and yeah, appreciate you joining
Thank you
us.
so much. And I can be found at www.avantdharma.com, and maybe Winston can forward that out to the people who are interested in finding me elsewhere. So
Awesome.
thank you
Sounds
so
good.
much, man.
Yeah.